welcome back to Reading with the Pastor. That's me, and the with part is you. I'm Adam. This is
Jacob,
and we are reading Dane Ortlund's book, Gentle and Lowly, and we hope it's something that whether you're reading along with us or not, you can benefit from the conversation. That there's something that as we talk about, it will point you to Christ. We certainly would recommend the book. We're enjoying it.
Oh, yeah.
And we're just getting into it, so we're just even beginning to unfold some of the ideas. And we're trying to answer three questions primarily each time. What we've read and how we've been brought to who Christ is affects what we're thinking, what we're feeling, and how we're acting.
Right.
But before we do that, real quick, how do you, bookmarks, what do you use?
Oh, I take that corner of the page and just fold it on down, man. Just put a little crease in there.
The dog ear.
The dog ear. It's the best way.
I can bear with that as long as it's not a library book that,
No, of course not. No.
Okay, all right. So
someone else's book, I'll do something else.
Okay.
My books.
I'm a bit chaotic with my bookmarks. Unless I have a dust jacket, which we discussed last time, then you can see I just got a little bookmark there. But I'm like a scrap of paper, receipt, old business cards. I have some bookmarks that some kids have made from the church, so those are probably my favorite. I lose them. So, all right,
or you could do, the best way and just tear out the pages you've read.
Ooh. All right, you're.
Yeah.
This is painting me.
No, dog ear is the best way.
All right, so we're at chapter 2.
Yes.
So like I said, we're just getting started, but the title of this chapter is His Heart in Action. And I'll just give you one phrase at the beginning of this chapter. He says his life proves his heart. That is Jesus. That if you were to look at the gospel accounts, at how Jesus acted, how he related, the things that he said, of course, but the things that he did, what would that show you about his heart? And so, going off those questions, so let's just start with something that you just thinking about, maybe not differently, but thinking about as a result.
Yeah, so he makes a good point on page 29. He's talking again, I hit a little bit on this last week, he's talking again about the nature of Christ and how Christ is multifaceted in a sense. There's lots of different aspects of Jesus and his character, and part of that is his wrath. That Christ is wrathful in a sense. And how we do have to hold those in tension together, and how our own upbringing and our own experiences can shape the way in which we can be tempted to view him lopsided, in a sense. So he talks a little bit about how if you come from a background that's maybe more chaotic, or you might like the more regimented and harsher maybe side of Christ, but if you come from the background of strict rules, and maybe you have some feelings of not measuring up to the standards your parents or others set for you, you might be more drawn to the kinder, more merciful side of Christ. And that's not necessarily wrong, because Christ is there for us in our experiences and in our histories, but we can have a tendency to overemphasize different parts of Jesus and God himself, in a sense. But he hits that, and I like, as he was talking about that, how to think through how we are viewing Christ, and how ultimately, as you're saying, his heart is for the suffering, for the sinners. His heart is love. That is the most all-encompassing, and that includes his wrath and his mercy, in a way. They're both encompassed in his love.
And yes, he certainly does a good job of balancing, and probably mindful that there would be some criticism that some might offer of saying, well, what about this? And I did think it was, he does say on page 29, as he's summing up, he says, it is impossible for the affectionate heart of Christ to be over-celebrated, made too much of, exaggerated. It cannot be pumped, but it is easily neglected, forgotten. We draw too little strength from it. And I think that's where my mind was thinking about, well, do I neglect it, forget it? Yes, we recognize Christ, or we try to recognize Christ in the fullness of who he is, even the parts that we're uncomfortable with. But what he's doing, the author's doing here, is just to move us to Christ and his mercy for sinners without saying that therefore God's no longer just.
Right.
Because that would be a different problem.
And once you have that balance, once you can hold those in tension, you kind of, in a sense, you can move past, at least for me, some of the, well, what about this? What about this? And really start digging into who Jesus is.
Okay.
And really start enjoying him more and learning about him more instead of, in a sense, critiquing your own image or others' images of Christ instead of digging into who he really is.
Okay. And one of the stories that he didn't pull out, but that I was reminded of, and it's a touching story to me, and I actually, no pun intended, because it's a story about a leper in the Gospel of Luke. And when Jesus heals this leper, and of course, at this time, lepers were to be outside of the community. It was dangerous to touch them. And this leper calls out to Jesus, and the lepers are supposed to be yelling, unclean, unclean, so that people would keep their distance. He calls out to Jesus, and Jesus comes close to him. And not only comes close to him, but touches him. And what we would normally expect in the way that we think of sin is that it's a contagion. Like, I'm not worried about my sin, I'm worried about yours. Don't get too close. But Jesus cannot be infected by our sin. And so to be reminded, even though Dana Ortland didn't bring that particular story, I was drawn back to that story, and it's one of my favorite ones in the Gospel of Luke, of Christ's heart. And that encourages me. And so that's where my emotions get drawn out of recognizing I'm the one who's been unclean, but that Christ has come near to and has touched. And that instead of him being infected by me, I am made whole by him.
Yeah. He does have a good quote in there, I think it's on page 32, where he's talking about Christ coming and spreading the good contagion of his cleansing mercy.
Okay.
I like that. Just the idea of his mercy and his love being a sort of a virus, if you will.
Right, and we're living with that. Yeah.
We have a good experience with that right now. You know, it's like,
I don't know if I'd say good, but we got to work on our. Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
All right, so sorry.
Okay.
I was just going to say in our last few minutes, what would you say in terms of? I mean, if you want to talk on the heart side of things too, but I don't want to give too much or too little time to what we thought of in terms of how does this change the way you act?
Yeah, so his whole point in this is that Christ's actions flowed from his heart. That you could tell his heart by his actions and what he did. And I think when we look at how Christ lived and how he reached out to the lepers, to those who are unclean, those who are unworthy, really, to me, as I was thinking about my own heart, my own hands, my own actions, I was asking, how do I act? Do I follow Christ in that? Do I reach out? Or do I recoil from those who are unclean, whatever that might mean to me or to you? Or not even necessarily recoil, but maybe just be apathetic towards, or ignore, or, I'm sorry, that's rough, buddy, but I've got other stuff going on.
Well, I think that was very much my thought, too, of am I keeping sinners, right, those other people, at arm's length? Or am I apathetic towards them?
Right.
Or am I not displaying for them, showing them the Savior that I follow? Now, I know, and you know, that we can't be their Savior, and I'm not trying to be that. But I do know that if I'm a real jerk, rather than displaying a compassionate kindness, I could get in the way. I firmly believe God can overcome my sinfulness, my foolishness. But I certainly want to picture Christ in the way that I treat others. If I've experienced this kind of love, I want it to then flow out of me as a result.
Right.
So I think we were very similar in our reaction to this chapter. And that's challenging.
Yeah.
It reminds me of why I need a Savior. Of course, because I'm going to fail in that. But it also was really good to think about Christ and his mercy towards sinners like you and me. The way that he comes near to us. Who he is in all of his perfection. And then as a result, because I've been changed by that, then He calls us to be the light.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about here at North Hills, we talk about being a city on a hill, shining a light.
Right.
Whose light is that? It's Christ's light,
Yeah.
right? One reminder, thank you for joining us, of course, but one reminder, if you have feedback, questions, comments, you want to share us your own reflections on the chapter, email us at reading@northhillschurch.net. We'll give you a little reminder at the end as well. You don't have to write this down. It'll be on the screen. But Jacob, thank you.
Thank you.
For reading with me. And
thank you.
Yeah.
Y'all have a good night, and we'll see you next time.